stay with the story. One of the key issues that were probed by the Zondo Commission was the manner in which the Government Communications and Information System, that's GCIS, was used to direct funds to entities affiliated with the Gupta family. The Commission heard from former GCIS head turned whistleblower Themba Maseko on how these capture attempts essentially unfolded. Eventually, the Commission found that indeed there was reasonable evidence proving the statements that were shared by Themba Maseko at the inquiry. The former DG and CEO of GCIS, author, and now with Wits School of Governance, that Themba Maseko joins us now via our video link. And I say all these things, good morning, by the way, it's great to have you on the program, because so much has taken place from the time you spoke out to where we are today. You've really gone through the full cycle of all 4 seasons, as it were. So as you, I imagine, go through digesting the findings of these inquiries, does the weight that comes with speaking out feel any lighter today than when it did at the time of your speaking?
It does feel a little lighter, to the extent that, you know, no South African, as we're speaking this morning, can claim not to know what really happened, what really transpired. So the importance for me of this report is that it just confirms all the allegations that were made and the testimony that we gave at the Commission itself. So I'm feeling lighter, but obviously cautiously optimistic, because the real fruit of our work would be when those who are guilty of corruption and state capture will be behind bars. But most importantly for the nation, I think what the report also highlights are some of the systemic problems that exist in our country: corruption, poor governance structures, wrong appointments, unethical individuals being appointed into key positions in state and state institutions. So I think that a lot of work needs to be done to make sure that some of the recommendations made by the Commission about strengthening our democracy are actually implemented. From an academic institution point of view, our task is to conduct research to see the extent to which we can make further recommendations about how we can strengthen our democracy by implementing some of the systemic challenges that have been identified by the Commission.
Yeah, you touched on various things. Let me just hone in on the last part of your response. It's interesting that you mentioned the role that can be played by those in academic institutions, because part of what many South Africans are feeling is a sense of being overwhelmed as well. There's just so much information. You're spoiled for choice about which of the issues to tackle. How do you approach this as an academic?
Well, I think that as a university, our most important task initially is to just simplify the report, just make it readable and accessible to members of the public, to various state institutions, but also to the media and the public at large. So our task is to make sure that we turn this report into a document that will be understood by an ordinary person, either in the township, suburbs, or in the rural areas, so that people can begin to understand what really happened, how did this happen in the first 20 years of our democracy, and then to make key recommendations about what changes we need to put in place in terms of policy, laws, but most importantly, structures that need to be put in place to make sure that, in fact, this does not occur again. The recommendation also makes important recommendations, such as the fact that we need to review the way we elect leaders into structures such as Parliament, because at the end of the day, those are structures that were responsible for making sure that we hold the executive accountable, that when there are allegations of corruption, those are thoroughly investigated. So making sure that we come up with recommendations as institutions to make sure that we introduce the necessary changes in our governance structures, in our systems, in our policies, to make sure that this does not recur.
Part of what the inquiry found through its own investigation in relation to your testimony was that some of the contracts entered into by the New Age newspaper, which we know is Gupta affiliated, as well as the SABC Transnet, and I think it was Eskom, those contracts were not only irregular, but they were also wasteful. You know, with the benefit of hindsight, and now that I guess a whole lot more people are likely to want to know more about this, what kind of relationship would those at the helm of GCIS, what kind of relationship would they have to have held with those who are doing the bidding for the Guptas for something like this to unfold the way it did?
Well, I think the Guptas were able to achieve what they did because they found willing partners within the political party, the ANC, but most importantly, they found willing individuals within state institutions such as your GCIS and SABC, ESCOM, Transnet, etc., etc. Because all of what the Guptas did through state capture would not have been possible if many of the people working in government resisted the unethical and illegal approaches from the Gupta family. So in my case, they approached me, they demanded money, I refused, and I lost my job. But there are people who were approached and agreed not only to assist, but also to benefit individually from the corruption that took place as a result of what the Guptas did. So the Guptas would not have succeeded if they did not have willing participants, willing partners within the party, especially in the name of the former president, President Zuma, and many CEOs of SOEs and DGs and ministers. So all of those people need to be held accountable to make sure that we begin to lay a foundation for people to understand that being elected or appointed into a senior position in the public service means that you owe accountability to the Constitution and to the people, and not to nefarious or corrupt individuals who want to benefit from state resources through theft. So by aiding and abetting, but most importantly, benefiting individually, they've committed the most serious crimes, in my view, treasonous crimes against the people of this country, and they need to be held accountable. But the focus must also be to build and strengthen our institutions so that this does not occur again in the future.
You know, to the point you're making, part of what the Commission also found is that had you not been removed as the head of GCIS and replaced by Mzwanele Manyi, state capture, at least of this nature, would not have occurred. That's quite the nod from the inquiry.
I think that what is very clear is that people like myself, and there are many others who resisted this state capture, but people of integrity in GCIS who were working as part of my team would have resisted, and they did resist, and they refused to be part of a grander scheme. And therefore, the strategy of the Guptas and those who were assisting them was to remove all of those who were resisting capture and replace them with people who will be amenable to their corrupt ways. So Minister Nene removed as Minister of Finance, and many others who lost their jobs in public service as a result of their refusal. So I think that it's time for the country to make sure that we select and appoint people with absolute integrity into these positions, because there will always be corrupt individuals who are out there to steal resources from the states. And unless we have people of integrity in all our institutions, in the private sector as well, corruption will continue to exist in this country. So they need to teach people about the importance of ethics, allegiance to the Constitution and to the people of this country, are some of the things that we as universities can actually play a role in making sure that we begin to produce a new kind of leadership who are committed to providing a service to our people through ethical means, and not going into public service because you want to steal. I mean, this whole mentality of people saying it's our time to eat, when they get into government positions or senior positions, they want to use those positions to actually steal money and enrich their friends and families.
Sure.
So we got to change that culture and begin to produce a new kind of leader for our nation.
Absolutely, a desperate need for that change. Themba Maseko, who's worn many hats, thanks very much indeed for your time speaking to us today in his capacity as a former head of GCIS. He was CEO there. He's also an author, by the way, more of his story in his book entitled For My Country, Why I Blew the Whistle on Zuma and the Guptas. All right.